Certainly. Below is the continuation of the speech, expanding key points 4, 5, and 6 in approximately 2,000 words, maintaining the flowing, educational, and motivational tone inspired by Carl Jung. The content remains open-ended, for future continuation, and avoids conclusion. There are moments in life when everything seems to fall apart, when the familiar no longer holds, and the structures we once depended on begin to crumble. These are not accidents. They are not punishments. They are necessary breakdowns. For it is often through collapse, not stability, that the soul calls us inward. Pain, which we so desperately seek to avoid, is not always an enemy. More often than not, it is the only force strong enough to break the ego's grip on a false identity. And when that identity begins to dissolve, what arises is not clarity at first, but disorientation, grief, and fear. It feels like death. And in a symbolic sense, it is to awaken, is to die to the person you once were convinced you had to be. The soul does not ask politely. It intervenes. It disrupts. It initiates. Suffering is its chisel, not because it desires destruction, but because it knows that transformation cannot happen through comfort. The old must give way to the new, and this transition is rarely smooth. The deeper your calling, the more intense the pressure to release what no longer serves it. And so life presents you with pain, not as punishment, but as invitation. To let go, to descend, to listen. No one chooses suffering consciously. But the psyche is deeper than consciousness. At some level, often beyond awareness, we are participants in our own undoing. Because the part of us that longs for authenticity understands that the path toward wholeness must pass through the fire. And so the soul allows the shattering. It allows the loneliness. It allows the questions without answers. Not because it delights in your despair, but because it recognizes what you are becoming on the other side of it. You are not broken. You are being remade. And in the darkest seasons, when nothing makes sense, and all roads appear blocked, the real work is being done. The soul works in darkness, in silence, in the parts of your life no one sees. It dismantles the illusions you built for safety. It strips away the masks you wore to be accepted. It removes the scaffolding of certainty so that something real, something eternal, can be born from the rubble. These inner deaths are not the end. They are thresholds. What feels like loss is the shedding of what no longer fits the next chapter of your evolution. Eventually, you stop asking why it hurts and start asking what it's teaching you. You stop resisting the fire and start cooperating with it. You begin to see that the very experiences you once resented are the same ones that made you conscious, that forced you to listen to the part of yourself that you had long silenced. The suffering that felt like abandonment was, in fact, the presence of something sacred working behind the veil. You were not being punished. You were being summoned. You don't find yourself by avoiding pain. You find yourself by moving through it. And once you do, once you begin to touch the deeper reality underneath the suffering, you realize that nothing was wasted. Every tear, every loss, every silence, it all pointed you inward. It all led you back to what matters, to what's real. And in that space, something begins to awaken. A calm, a knowing, a quiet strength. You stop searching for meaning outside and begin discovering it within. What you feared would destroy you becomes the very thing that initiates you into your truth. And the chaos that once confused you now becomes your teacher. You begin to see that your pain was not a detour, but the path itself. That your wounds were not signs of failure, but of aliveness. That your questions were not obstacles, but invitations to deepen your relationship with mystery. And suddenly, life is no longer about avoidance. It is about embracing the complexity of your becoming. You understand now. You are not lost. You were becoming. The journey inward is not linear. It is cyclical, like the seasons. There are winters of the soul, where all seems barren and lifeless. But beneath the frozen surface, the roots deepen. Growth does not always look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like retreat, like surrender, like silence. And it is in these hidden moments, the moments no one applauds, that your foundation is being rebuilt. You are not who you were. You are not yet who you will become. You are in the in-between. And that, too, is sacred. Do not regret the years you spent wandering, the relationships that didn't last, the opportunities that slipped away. Every experience brought you closer to what is essential. Nothing was wasted. Even your mistakes were part of the design. The detours taught you what the direct path could not, and the delays protected you from arriving before you were ready to receive. You may look back and feel sorrow for the time, It took you may feel shame for the versions of yourself that you've outgrown. But the truth is, each version carried you as far as it could. And when it could no longer go further, the soul intervened. It created friction. It created discomfort. It created the circumstances that forced you to shed what had become too small. Growth is often disguised as loss, and beginnings are often dressed as endings. And then something unexplainable happens. A shift, subtle at first, but unmistakable. You wake up one day and realize the things that once consumed you no longer have power. The habits you once clung to now feel foreign. The people you used to seek approval from now feel distant, not because you pushed them away, but because you've outgrown the need to be seen through their eyes. You are no longer trying to become someone. You are remembering who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning. And in this remembering, something profound begins to occur. You stop chasing. You stop grasping. You stop resisting. And in that stillness, your soul begins to lead. Not in loud proclamations, but in quiet certainties. In intuitive nudges. In moments of peace that make no sense to the mind. You no longer need a roadmap. You are guided from within, and you follow not because you've figured everything out, but because you've learned to trust that you will be shown the next step. When the time is right, you cannot explain this shift to others. It is not logical. It does not conform to the structures of the world. It is not marked by achievement or recognition. It is an inner knowing, a subtle authority that requires no validation. When the soul leads, you move in harmony with something greater than yourself. You begin to see the signs, not with your eyes, but with your being. A passage in a book speaks directly to you. A dream reveals a forgotten truth. A conversation triggers a realization that alters your direction. This is not coincidence. It is synchronicity, the language of the soul. And you begin to realize that you do not need to understand everything. That certainty is not the goal. That control was always an illusion. What you need is presence, openness, surrender. The soul does not ask you to map out the future. It asks you to align with the present moment so fully that the next step becomes clear, without effort. It does not ask for guarantees. It asks for faith not in something outside you, but in the deeper intelligence that lives within. This guidance is not loud. It does not compete for attention. It is soft, like a whisper, but it is constant. And once you learn to listen, once you learn to honor its presence, you will never again need to force your way through life. You will be carried, not by chance, but by resonance. Because the world outside begins to mirror the clarity you've cultivated within. This is not magic. It is alignment. You will know things without knowing how. You will feel drawn to places, people, decisions, not because they make perfect sense, but because they feel inexplicably right. And you will realize that this is not confusion. It is clarity of a higher order. A clarity that doesn't conform to the logic of fear or the calculations of the ego. It is the clarity of the soul, and once you experience it, nothing less will satisfy. You stop asking the world for direction. You stop waiting for others to affirm your path. You know now that the truest compass lives within. And though others may not understand, though they may question or doubt or even resist your transformation, you no longer need to be understood. You need only to be honest with yourself. And when you are, when you live from that place of inner truth, life begins to respond in kind. The right people appear. The right opportunities unfold. The right challenges arise not to defeat you, but to refine you. Because now, you are no longer living by default. You are living by design. Not a design imposed from outside, but one emerging from the depths of your being. And you realize this was never about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who you are, and allowing your life to reflect that truth without apology. There comes a moment in life that doesn't arrive with fanfare but with silence. A quiet certainty. After years of confusion, pain, or relentless searching, you suddenly find yourself standing where you once begged the universe to take you, and you wonder, why now? This speech reveals the answer. Not the one the world gives, but the one your soul has known all along. Because some truths can't be forced, they must be lived into. Stay until the end, because the moment you understand why it took this long, is the same moment everything begins to make sense. Certainly. Below is the expanded speech, elaborating on key points 1, 2, and 3 in approximately 2,000 words, written in an educational and motivational tone deeply inspired by the ideas and emotional atmosphere of Carl Jung. The content flows without headings or conclusive phrasing, to ensure continuity into later sections. There is within every individual an invisible compass that does not answer to the mind or the will, but to something much older, deeper, and infinitely more mysterious. It is what some call the soul, others the self, and many simply know as that silent voice that will not be silenced. It does not shout, it does not beg, it does not argue. It waits. It waits until your illusions collapse, until your defenses weaken, until the noise of the world no longer satisfies the ache within. And when the time is right, not by human calculation, but by inner necessity, you are drawn, not pushed, to the path that has always belonged to you. We are conditioned to believe that progress must be measured, that growth must be forced, that destiny must be pursued with relentless striving. Yet the soul does not unfold according to human ambition. It unfolds in rhythms that are timeless. And these rhythms are not chaotic. They are precise, though we often do not recognize their order until we look back in hindsight. The timing of your transformation, your healing, your arrival, it was not arbitrary. You did not simply wake up by chance. You arrived because something within you had ripened in silence. When people ask why their life feels stuck, or why their prayers seem unanswered, it is often because they are expecting the ego to initiate what only the soul can activate. You cannot will yourself into readiness. You cannot command depth. You cannot fabricate an awakening. It must be suffered. It must be lived. It must be earned through experience. Just as a fruit cannot be rushed to ripen without becoming bitter or spoiled, so too the inner life must evolve at a pace determined by forces beyond immediate comprehension. The tragedy of modern life is that it honors appearance over process. We are expected to look successful before we are whole, to perform strength while we quietly bleed, to pretend readiness when we are still unraveling. But the soul has no interest in performance. It seeks only truth. And truth does not come in the form of immediate answers or convenient milestones. It comes through the slow disintegration of falsehoods, through the painful peeling away of masks, through nights of despair that feel like death but are in fact initiation. You were never behind. You were never late. You were becoming. That ache in your chest, that restlessness, that unbearable tension between who you are and who you're meant to become, it is not a mistake. It is a contraction before the birth of something real. And though it may appear as though nothing is changing on the surface, there is an alchemical process underway within you. The soul works beneath consciousness, rearranging your priorities, dislodging attachments, undoing the layers of identity that no longer reflect your truth. And when the inner scaffolding has been prepared, when the psyche is strong enough to hold what it once feared, you are brought to the threshold, not by accident, but by design. The delay you've suffered was not a denial of your destiny. It was the soul's protection of something sacred. You see, the greatest truths are dangerous when handled too soon. Insight without structure leads to collapse. Power without integration leads to corruption. Clarity without suffering breeds arrogance. And so the soul, knowing this, slows the process, not to punish you, but to purify you, to shape the vessel before it is filled, to prepare the path within before the path without is revealed. We are so easily tempted by the idea that delay equals failure. That because we did not arrive when others did, or because we struggled longer than we expected, something must be wrong. But this is the voice of the outer world, not the inner wisdom that guides true transformation. The caterpillar, in its cocoon, does not emerge on the timeline of the butterfly next to it. Its timing is its own, and if forced out too early, it will die, not because it lacked potential, but because it was not yet strong enough to fly. You cannot rush healing. You cannot will yourself into spiritual maturity. You can only surrender to the process that your soul has always known was necessary. And this process is often hidden. It unfolds in places no one sees, in quiet decisions, in private pain, in subtle shifts of perception. You may feel as though you are doing nothing while everything is actually being undone. What looks like stillness is often transformation, in its most sacred form. Do you remember the seasons of your life when you begged for answers, for direction, for change? And do you also remember how nothing seemed to respond? The silence you experienced was not avoided, was a womb. It was not abandonment. It was incubation. The soul will often withdraw from the noise of the world to cultivate something deeper within you. And though this retreat may feel like isolation or even punishment, it is, in truth, the sacred space where the real work is done. And then, when you least expect it, life begins to move, not because you made it happen, but because the inner alignment has occurred. You start noticing patterns. You hear a phrase that touches something deep inside. You meet a stranger who speaks exactly what you needed to hear. You find yourself in a moment so oddly precise, so intricately aligned, that you can no longer dismiss it as coincidence. This is synchronicity. It is not random. It is not luck. It is the soul speaking through the outer world, mirroring what has shifted within. Synchronicity is the confirmation that you are finally aligned not with a goal, but with your nature. It appears not when you are forcing life to obey your will, but when your will has surrendered to something larger. There is an ancient intelligence that moves through your life. You do not control it. You participate in it. And this participation requires trust that what seems like delay is often sacred timing. Trust that the soul does not forget its purpose. And trust that when it is time, you will be led without resistance. The moment will come when the same door that once felt locked suddenly opens without effort. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And the irony, of course, is that when you finally arrive, you no longer feel the need to prove anything. You are no longer desperate to be understood, or validated, or seen. You are no longer chasing meaning, because you have become the meaning. What you searched for outside now lives within you. The external signs merely reflect the internal readiness. The deepest shifts happen not in the grand moments of achievement, but in the subtle realization that you no longer fear what once paralyzed you, that you are no longer attached to what once defined you, that you are no longer trying to become someone you are finally allowing yourself to be. This is the wisdom of the soul. It does not rush. It does not argue. It does not explain. It guides you through delay, through silence, through suffering, not to punish you, but to prepare you for what you asked for when you are not yet ready to receive it. And when you are ready, life itself becomes the confirmation. The signs are everywhere, a phrase that finds you, a dream that lingers, a memory that returns with new meaning, a door that opens without resistance. What once felt like endless waiting now feels like perfect timing, because your soul was never late. It was waiting for you to return to it. And now, you're here.